Welcome back to Race Report, the Lewis Fan Club edition.
So, another busy weekend in racing. We had IndyCar, NASCAR, and F1 all going down at the same time. We're going to do a little switcheroo this week and start things off with the IndyCar Mid Ohio race. So, to start, Alex Palou was on pole by 0.0024 seconds, which is the smallest gap in IndyCar history. We had Pato O'Ward starting P2 and David Malukas starting P3 in his second race back. Super exciting for him. I know that I've missed him and seeing him in a seat. He didn't have the best race, but he did finish 12th, which was the best finishing spot that car has been in this season.
So Alex Palou led most of the race from pole, but when he came into pit, he comes in a lap after Pato O'Ward, who was also pretty much staying kind of right behind him, P1 and P2, and had a slow stop and ultimately comes out behind Pato. After he comes out, then Pato pretty much, he leads the rest of the race to go on and win. And I know technically he ended up winning like the first race of the season 8 weeks later because of the Penske penalties, but it's his first like win where he crossed the finish line first since 2022. Palou was on his tail the whole time, and like watching it, I was so like tense, like especially after F1, and then watching this, I was like, please don't make a mistake, like you can do it. And I think he ended up winning by like 0.5 of a second in the end. And then Scott McLaughlin came third, but he was 16 seconds behind, which just shows how much of a gap those two had in front of the rest of the pack.
This was also the first week with the new hybrid system debuted. If anyone doesn't know, IndyCar is now trying to adopt in a hybrid system very similar to how F1 cars work, where you have a gas component and electric component. I know a lot of us are wondering why launch this mid-season, why not wait and bring this in at the beginning of a year. But it's definitely given us some interesting moments this weekend. We had a few drivers either stall out, or in the case of Romain Grosjean, he actually spun out during the race. But the really great benefit of this new system is that a lot of the drivers are able to self-restart, which means it's much easier for them to rejoin a race without having to cause a caution and delay everything. And, instead of having to have all the drivers race under caution for a prolonged period of time, we're just back to green, no problem.
So, more to the point on the hybrid engines, we did a little research, and the additional power is deployed through the same motor generator on the driver's demand. The hybrid power unit, which is 280 kilojoules per lap at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, will be available in addition to traditional push-to-pass on the road and street circuits. It's 200 seconds at a maximum of 20 seconds per push at Mid-Ohio. Used simultaneously, the package will provide an additional 120 horsepower. Due to the new engines being introduced, no one is a stranger to a couple of hiccups. Scott Dixon faced the brunt of this. He had mechanical issues at the start of the race. The race restarted on lap 3. He later joins 22 laps into the race, but eventually has to retire his car.
This was an interesting race because, as a lot of us know, IndyCar wouldn't be IndyCar without at least one yellow flag, if not multiple. It was a very calm race, I think because they could restart their cars, because the only caution was at the beginning with Dixon, and he was the only DNF, which I feel like is pretty rare for IndyCar. So I was surprised by that, but pleasantly surprised. And also some news from earlier in the week, Alexander Rossi, it was announced that he would no longer be racing at Arrow McLaren next year, and that Christian Lundgaard, who's currently at Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Racing, would be replacing him. Now Rossi is without a seat, and we don't know where he's going. I would love to see him at Prema because they're joining next year, but we'll see.
Remember when we were joking about McLaren, like, well, they can't change up things any more than they already have.
They're like, well, we won't change up the number 6 car, but we'll change up the number 7 car.
It's like, you caught us on the last 3. Now we'll switch it up.
Yeah, it's like, we'll just change the car.
Like Lauren mentioned, maybe not the most exciting race since there weren't a ton of like cautions or things like that. But I know all three of us were really excited to see Pato get that win, especially after finishing like P2 at the Indy 500. this is something he's been, needing for a long time. And, we're big Pato Award fans in this household.
So speaking of NASCAR, I was actually there. I flew up on a Saturday and then flew home on a Sunday. I was there in the city probably for like maybe a little over 24 hours. I went up. So my uncle works for the city in the building department. So he did a lot of the like permits for the street race in regards to the buildings and, what they have to have in order to make it a street race. So he is the same uncle that came with me to the Indy 500, and my oldest cousin volunteered for the race, and she was like, "You should come and volunteer for the race too." And I was like, "Okay, sure, free place to live. Go get to see another race. Let's do it." So we ended up being on the same team together, and it was much different than when I marshaled for MotoGP because we just stood there and gave people directions until the start of the race. And then we ran on, well, actually, no, that's a lie. We volunteered again. I pushed my way to the front of the thing because we got to be the people who like kind of are like the little person barricade between the drivers and then the VIP walk. So the drivers just drove right in front of me. Like I could have easily lunged out and like touched Ricky or Kyle Larson. I chose to refrain from that and keep some dignity, but I wanted to, but I didn't. We got to like walk up and down the pit lane, and like you could go and I mean they wouldn't let you touch the cars, but you could almost touch the cars again, and just kind of like see all of their little garages and where they keep all their tools and all the little mechanics. Then we got to sit and watch the race in the pit lane because we had our little staff passes on still, and then they made all the VIP people who had like VIP tickets. And mind you, I signed up and it was free. The people who were there paid like $5,000 for their VIP pit ticket. They had to stand against the wall. I got to stand up at the barricade because I had the staff pass, and I was like, I did like 4 hours of work and I get to be here for free. And then it did start torrential downpouring, and my cousin and I joked because she went to the Indy 500 with me and it torrential downpoured on us. And then at the Chicago race, torrential downpoured on us, that we are just too powerful together to go to any more races because it will inevitably rain. More to the point on the rain, to many Chicagoans, it was very disappointed because the whole sort of surrounding idea of NASCAR coming back, because it's a 3-year contract, so last year, this year, and next year, was like unfinished business because last year the race was cut short due to the rain. So when the rain started up again and it was looking more and more to the point of, oh, yet another year of unfinished business, I know it was really hard for a lot of people who put in a lot of work for this weekend. I'm sure it was a disappointment for the drivers as well. But fear not, we persevered. We came through. They went back out. There was a bit of a time delay, so sunset started around 8:10, so the race had to be done by 8:10 just due to there not being enough light, and driver safety is a big concern for the city, so they were like, you got to be done by then. So thankfully, after a 2-hour delay, they were able to get back up and get out on the race. And yeah, that was good. Oh, and when the clock hit 0, so they raced until 8 o'clock. When the clock hit 0, whoever was the leader for the last 2 laps, they were the winner.
The winner was Alex Bowman. It was his first win ever on a street course, but his 8th overall victory in the Cup Series. And he had been currently on an 80 race winless streak. So this was very exciting for him and his whole team. He had a concussion back in September of 2022 and then broke his back in April of 2023. So he's had a lot of like medical setbacks and injuries. So that just makes this victory even sweeter for him. So congrats to Alex. That is an awesome victory for him.
I didn't know a lot about Alex, but after reading through some articles, I feel like we would be homies. 2 quick quotes that I wanted to share with you guys because I think they're absolutely iconic and hilarious. Alex said after the race, quote, "Man, I broke my back. I had a brain injury and we've kind of sucked ever since." And then shortly after that said, "We're going to drink so much damn bourbon tonight. It's going to be a bad deal. I'm probably going to wake up naked on the bathroom floor again." Keyword on that being again, which is
I know.
so real. And like, I feel like this is that moment that you see with racing series like NASCAR that is so fun and exciting that you don't get with F1. If any of the F1 drivers ever said something like that, their PR team would actually cease to live. And it's just so real and so human. And like, this is just a guy who's like, I like to drive cars and I'm also kind of cool and kind of fun. And I did break my back.
Up next is the British GP, Silverstone, the one and only. We had three Brits on the start. So George, Hamilton, and then Lando. And then a quick shout out to Hulkenberg, who was a top P6. Props to him. And surprise, surprise, yet again, Ferrari's struggling for pace. I wish I could say this was a rare occurrence. Unfortunately, they are repeat offenders.
Some other stuff that went down ahead of and leading into the race, Pierre Gasly was fitted for a new power unit and as a result was given a 50-place grid penalty because he had exceeded his allotment for the season. Um, if you watched Quali, it was pretty clear that like they weren't even trying with him because even if he qualified P1, he's starting P20 any which way. Um, After the formation lap, Gasly is told to box due to a gearbox issue, and he did unfortunately have to retire the car before the start. However, in terms of how a race may go, if they're going to have problems on any race, it might as well be one where they're starting all the way at the back. So a lot to gain, but nothing to lose at least. In terms of other retirements that we had during the race, there was only one other one. Our pole sitter, George Russell, was told to retire the car on lap 34 due to a mechanical issue with the car. If you guys watched or listened to last episode, I think you can tell that all three of us were pretty happy when we saw that. And that's all I'll say about Mr. George Russell today.
My personal favorite part of the race, I think, was kind of starting around lap 18, which was when the rain started to come down. George was leading the race, and then I guess it was Lewis and then McLaren's, I think. Yeah. And so George was leading, and then Lewis was able to overtake George and was then in the lead. And then, like a couple laps later, Lando comes through because all of a sudden, like, their kind of tires or whatever, for whatever reason, were doing better in the rain, and Lando was able to come through and then take the lead. So it was like kind of like a switcheroo of the lead, like, okay, what's going down here? Another moment I liked was I kind of knew Lewis was going to be on good form from the radio message when he told Bono, like, no, about coming into box. Bono was like, we need a box for inters. And he was like, no, it's way too dry out here, man. Like, I'm not coming in. And so I'm like, when Lewis starts talking back, then that means he's, like, in that headspace of, I'm going to win. Like, also when he just told Bono again, like, just let me drive. I was like, okay, this is going to be a good race if Lewis is talking back to Bono. So yeah, that moment was kind of my favorite. Like, you just knew that the race was going to be good when that was happening at the beginning. Like, the lead changing so much, Lewis talking back to Bono. I was like, this is great stuff.
10 out of 10 agree. I really enjoyed actually seeing, like, every time I look up at the TV, it's a new race leader. It's Lando, it's Lewis, it's George, it's not Max. And that was such a great moment to, like, get to watch a race where, for once, like, Max Verstappen was just out of the question. This race had nothing to do with him. It had very little. As we all know, and as we are all supporting today, Lewis Hamilton wins the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Big shout out to Crofty on his commentary. We've been waiting for this one, and it was a record-breaking win. Lewis is the first driver to win a race after 300 race starts in their career. It has been 945 days since his last win in Saudi 2021. He has achieved the most podiums at a single circuit, 15 of them at Silverstone specifically. The most wins at a single circuit, 9, Silverstone again. And the most consecutive podiums at a single circuit, 12.
And then also extended most podium record, which is now 199, extended most win record, which is 104, oldest winner of a 21st century race, 39, longest gap between first and last wins, 17 years, 1 month, Canada 2007 to UK 2024.
As much as there was a bunch of really fun stuff going on the track, I know a lot of us really enjoyed some of the off-track action in the cool-down room, specifically when Max turns to Lewis and goes, "Oh, been a while for you, huh?" Talking about, him winning. And for Lewis to respond right back with ball hog, I giggled so loud. I was in the car with my friend watching on my phone, and I was like, he did not just call him a ball hog, like on TV. But yeah, definitely wasn't, the Max Verstappen podcast for once.
Lewis trying to do it out of the kindness of his heart, but definitely coming across as destroying Lando and then rubbing his face in it. He goes, "You stayed out one lap too long." "I know. Tell me about it." "You were on the softs. You had 2 new mediums." "I know." "Oh yeah? You could have gone on the mediums. It would have been faster probably."
I have a quick comment to toss in on Kaylee's reenactment. Kaylee, love the reenactment. Perfect. No notes. As a Lando fan, as the resident Lando apologist in this little family that we have, it was a rough race for him. Watching him get out of the car at the end after, what could have been a race win and turned into a measly P3 on the podium, you could just see that he knew immediately, like, wow, we really screwed that one up. So I can see why he was just so over it in the cool down room. I think you kind of saw it again on the podium, where it was more like I am here because I have to be here, not because I am happy about how things have turned out. Again.
Continuing on kind of with the tire talk, I feel like tires are what was make or break for this race and kind of really was the reason that we saw Lewis win. I mean, obviously he's talented and all that, but I feel like this really kind of secured the win for him, was that they had the correct tire strategy the whole time. So the medium tires seemed to be the best tire for this race. They had like the most pace, and they weren't degging as fast as the soft. And kind of everyone seemed to prefer those medium tires, and almost everyone started out on them. Obviously, then we had the rain and switched to inters. But what was good between McLaren and Mercedes is that they held out on pitting for those inters. They both realized, okay, it's not wet enough out here. We can stay on the slick tires for longer. And that really helped them kind of be the front runners, where McLaren messed up because Mercedes didn't really mess up on tire strategy at all for once. They should have double stacked. So Mercedes double stacked both Lewis and George when they came in for inters, and they did not for McLaren. McLaren just brought Lando in and left Oscar out for an extra lap, and that really hurt his race. Then again, when they pitted back for slicks, Lando was their leader of the two. And normally, whoever is leading or doing better in the race, you pit them first or pit them in the more favorable spot, which this time would have been first. And they didn't. They brought Oscar in, which does not make any sense to me whatsoever. They brought Lando in for slicks. Second, they also had a slow stop. So on top of the fact that they should have put him first, when they did pit him, there was a slow stop. And because of that, when he came back out on track, he came out right behind Lewis, giving Lewis the lead of the race. Like, they basically handed it to him, like, here is the lead of the race. Another mistake that was kind of talked about in the little cool down room segment was Lando was told on the radio, you can either pit for softs to cover people like Hamilton or pit for mediums to cover people like Verstappen. And he chose to pit for softs, which ended up being another mistake and leading to Lewis winning the race. As Lewis had said in the cooldown room, McLaren had new sets of mediums. Lewis didn't, hence why he pitted for the softs. And Max ended up choosing the hard tires. But because of that, Lando's tires had some degradation pretty fast, and he just couldn't keep pace with Lewis, which ultimately led to Max overtaking him, hence Lando finishing third. I think it just also shows to like the experience of Lewis of how he could maintain those softs all the way to the end and not have Max catch him, which again they also were talking about that in the cool down room, and Max was like impressed that Lewis held out so far on the softs. It really all came down to tires and Lewis's like skill and expertise in the rain. I think correct tire choices and correct strategy could have really changed how the race played out.
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot with McLaren. They've had such a successful season in comparison to the last however many years, and it's starting to feel like maybe they just like weren't prepared to do so well, and it really just feels like, you know, oh, like we could actually win these things, and now they just don't know how to strategize for that, right? Their last couple years have been them strategizing to stay at the top of the midfield, and now it's like you got to one up that and be ready to strategize for a win. And at the end of the day too, like with asking Lando like, oh, well, we've got mediums and we've got softs, your job is to know what tire is the better choice. Like you have all of the data in front of you, and the fact that you're not making the right choice is just shocking to me. Like I know Lauren joked about it kind of off the pod, but like you're starting to look like Ferrari out there. Like there's just not a good reason. You've had so many races this season that you so closely could have won if you had done a measly ounce better on your strategy decisions. And you have two excellent drivers that are so deserving of podiums and wins, and they're the ones missing out on it because you guys can't get your shit together. Let's talk about this week's biggest losers. I think it's pretty fair to say Checo and Charles Leclerc both really lost out this race once again. Not great strategy choices, super terrible qualifying positions. I think we had Charles starting P11 and finishing P12. Checo, I don't even know. I think he was a pit lane start and a doesn't even matter finish. Once again, Ferrari strategy, sitting over there in their clown costumes, in the way that Lewis made the right call to say, I'm not coming in for inters yet. Ferrari made the wrong call, and they pit Charles way too early onto the inters. As a result, the track was not wet enough and ate those tires apart. He had to change them twice. After the last few races, the team decided the Barcelona setup and upgrade was not working the way they wanted it to, so they've reverted back to the Imola version. And in his post-race interview, we got this nice little clip from Charles saying, it's been 4 races that it's been worse than a nightmare. I hope we can come back soon. How many times can I hear from Ferrari, just keep pushing, we're going to keep pushing. Next race, we can do this. You guys won in Monaco, and you've like let everything just fall to the wayside since then. And it's, you know, I'm a Tifosi, Forza Ferrari till I die, but it's gonna kill me sooner rather than later at this rate.
We will all be making our way towards an early grave.
Yeah, I honestly completely forgot about Charles's race. Like I couldn't like if he was racing or not racing, I wouldn't have been able to tell you, besides like the fact of them talking about Ferrari's poor strategy. Because I mean, and it's not like the whole of Ferrari, like I don't know what they're doing with Charles, because it's not just his fault, because Carlos is running, like he's up there fighting with Max this race, so I'm like, okay, at least he's getting some points for the team, but I'm like,
it's because
what
he
is
took his
going
own
on?
engineering classes and now is just his own engineer.
That's true. So some honorable mentions of our other top finishers from this race. I love Lewis, and like yes, he deserved driver of the day, but my like low-key driver of the day, or my P2 for driver of the day, was Hulkenberg. He not only qualified 6th, he finished 6th, and he has scored more points than Checo in the past 2 races than Checo has in the past 6 in a Haas. So we'll just let that one sink in for a moment. I know he's going to Sauber next year, and they have one more year of Sauber before they're Audi, and I am hoping that they get better, because Sauber right now is a literal garbage can on wheels. Love my Haas boys. Shout out to Hulk. 10 out of 10. performance.
And then some of our other honorable mentions: Alex ending in P9, Yuki in P10, woo, and then our fair lady, Logie Bear, in P11.
I will say I do feel like in the last like 2, maybe 3 races with Logan, like we are seeing significant improvement. He's been qualifying much better. He's out qualified his own teammate. Now he's finishing just outside of the points. Let's talk about some of the rumors going on.
Logan to IndyCar, which, I mean, I feel like is a tale as old as time at this point. It's been going on since second race of the season that people were speculating he would go to IndyCar. And honestly, I think I can speak for all of us when I would say we would sad to see him leave, but happy to see him go. We all believe that he would do very well in IndyCar, and it would be a fresh start, a new exciting adventure. Prema is entering Indy in 2025 with a 2-car team. Logan also raced for Prema in F2, and so I think that's sort of perpetuating the rumor of, if he goes to IndyCar, he will race for them and vice versa. So exciting things maybe in his future.
I'm here for it. Like, listen, he'll at least have us because we're IndyCar fans and we're Logan Sargent fans. And at the end of the day, if Logan Sargent has no fans, I am dead.
There is even more rumors surrounding Logan, and this is out in left field, but this was like really talked about at Silverstone for some reason, and like the commentators were getting in on it too. So I don't really know who came out with this one, and I don't think there's much merit to it, but we'll dive into it anyways. So it is that Logan is to be replaced mid-season. What they were talking about was that Ocon would be released early from his contract at Alpine and go to Williams to replace Logan for the rest of the season. And then I was like, I don't know about this one, especially with the Ocon to Haas rumors, which have been going around for some weeks and seem to carry a little bit more weight. But kind of on the point of Logan kind of leaving F1, which we kind of all pretty much know is going to happen, James Vowles made a comment saying that we are continually evaluating our driver lineup and we are open-minded towards things. And then when asked to clarify, he goes on to say, I have told Logan what is expected of him, and if he is not delivering, we will have to look at things.
I don't see why Alpine would let Ocon go like mid-season because yeah, as much as they're not like big fans of him and like things are kind of awkward, like he is still scoring points for the team. I don't see why you would potentially let him go mid-season and replace him with someone who maybe won't score points. That just seems way too complicated and really is giving Arrow McLaren vibes of the number 6 car. Like, let's just put another person in it. Let's just keep putting people in it. One of the other rumors that we've all been hearing on and off throughout the season is Checo. What's going to happen to him? More up-to-date rumor is that he is going to be replaced mid-season. I think people were saying around like Belgium at this point. We all know he just signed a new contract, but there is a clause possibly in that contract that tells us that he needs to stay within 100 points of max. He is currently not within that window. He is 137 points below him and is in P6 in the championship standings. He was doing pretty okay the first couple races, but fell off completely after Miami. In his last 5 races, we had 2 DNFs, a P8 and P7 finish, and then a P17 finish. He got beat out by a Haas in pace in Austria, and like Lauren mentioned earlier, Nico has scored more points in the last 2 races than Checo has in 6. This is also the 6th time Logan has out-qualified Checo, and to put that into perspective, this was the 12th race of the season. In half of the races this season, Logan Sargent has out-qualified Checo in a Williams. And this is a driver who is at risk of losing his own seat, out-qualifying someone who's supposed to be in the best car on the track. It's just kind of alarming that Max has won half of the races and Checo's been out-qualified in half of them too.
Sort of more to that point, Horner's comments implied that Checo's signing a contract did not mean that he would be in a seat for 2025. Brundle asked Horner if he wishes he didn't sign Checo so early. Horner replies, that is a hard question. The contents of the agreement are not going to be disclosed to you lot. Potentially, this could imply that there's sort of more to Julia's point earlier, a clause that if he doesn't perform well, he will still could be a Red Bull driver. He just won't be in a seat. Checo, he just isn't doing what he needs to be doing in a car of that caliber to have really earned that seat. When there are drivers in, you know, VCAB who could come up, there are other drivers on the grid that could potentially go to that car. Carlos could go to Red Bull. As it stands right now, Checo has not earned the right to be in that seat, in my opinion. Especially with the Constructors' Championship and having all this pressure from both McLaren and formerly Ferrari and now Mercedes sort of chomping on the heels of Red Bull. Checo really needs to pick up the pace if he wants to continue to sort of have the fame and glory that goes along with being a Red Bull driver.
I mean, I don't know if he'll be replaced mid-season just because that's not a great look for Red Bull, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of clause and that if he doesn't kind of pull his weight from the season, then he will not be in that seat next year. Personally, I would like it to be Liam. I mean, Daniel's been doing pretty good this season, but not enough where I'm like, oh yes, he needs to, like, he's the one to replace Checo, but I definitely don't think Checo is doing anywhere near enough to be helping Red Bull with that Constructors' Championship. At the beginning of the season, yes, like he was podiuming, he was like in the top five, like he was scoring the points needed to like have a good place from Red Bull, but I mean these last couple races with the multiple DNFs, the P17s, like that's just I mean, literally with Nico scoring more points in the last two races than him in the last six, it's just like it's honestly embarrassing. So
I want it to be my boy Yuki in that seat. I've said it before and I will say it again. I think Yuki could be a really good second driver to Max. Lauren, I know you said that you don't think that they are going to do a mid-season swap. I think if they want to win a Constructors' Championship this year, they have to. If you look at the teams directly below them, regularly on race weekends, they're having both drivers finishing in the points. Whether that's, you know, a P10 finish and a P4, or in the case of McLaren where it's, you know, a P3 and a P4, that's big points. And Max winning races or coming P2 isn't getting them enough points to make up that difference that they're losing with Checo. It's just not. Yeah, Max can run away with the Drivers' Championship, but if things don't change with Checo, I think Red Bull is seriously going to lose the Constructors, without a doubt.
So that is the end of our little rumor gossip segment and rolling into our newest edition, the Ick Corner. I'm gonna kick us off with an IndyCar driver. No one in F1 really gave me the ick this week, mainly because I think I was so happy about Lewis that I didn't really care about what anyone else was doing. But in IndyCar, I have major beef with Joseph Newgarden. And is this very delayed beef with Joseph Newgarden? Probably, but I have it now. So I finally have been watching this season of 100 Days to Indy. Very delayed in my watching. But if you didn't already know, I loved the Bus Bros. Like the past two seasons, if you don't know, the Bus Bros was Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin, who are teammates on Team Penske, and they had their little YouTube show called the Bus Bros. Everyone should go watch it on YouTube. And they really were like good friends who did this like little show together, had a great camaraderie, great teammates, blah blah blah. But last season, Scott McLaughlin beat both of his teammates, Joseph and Will Power, in the standings out of Team Penske. He scored the most points, even though Joseph won the 500. So Joseph was like, I'm going to dedicate my life to racing and no more distractions. I'm cutting out my management team. No more Bus Bros. Then when it started the season, they're like, oh, we're not doing Bus Bros anymore. And everyone was kind of like, oh, like, what's up with that? And so on 100 Days to Indy, they were talking about it too. And they're like, so, like, what happened with that, you know? And Scott, to the camera, he's like, asked Joseph about it. And I was like, oh, so it's Joseph's fault, as I had kind of suspected. So I was like, okay, interesting. And then they kind of go on to talk about how now Joseph and Scott don't even interact at all. Like they're teammates and they like actively avoid each other. It's giving Mercedes 2.0. I feel like Joseph Newgarden's got a little bit full of himself recently, more than usual. I think there's needs to be a little bit of work-life balance. Like, okay, you won the 500 again, great, but like at what cost? Like you lost your buddy, your bus bro. There and there's like multiple commentators like talking about it. They're like it's just awkward in the team room and the three of them during their debriefs and like they're actively separated and like don't chat like at race weekends.
I get it. I've always felt a little sus about him. My ick corner this week, funny enough, he escaped it last week, but he's usually hanging out there. Talked about him a little bit earlier. Checo. And like, not to beat a dead horse, but it's just so frustrating watching someone have so many continuous opportunities in such a good car like the Red Bull. When we've seen in the past, Pierre Gasly gets put in the Red Bull seat, dropped. Alex Albon gets put in the Red Bull seat, dropped. So if you have a history of if you're not performing, you're gone, and this is the exception is someone who's DNF twice, barely finishes in points, finishes P17, and gets his ass smacked by Logan Sargent. It's just icky. It's embarrassing, and like, what blackmail does this man have on Christian Horner that he just gets to keep his seat is what I really want to know, because it's got to be good.
Last but not least, my icks. We have a returner this week, Charles, mostly because he got beat by Logan Sargent. Now, everyone here is no stranger to the fact that I love Logan. Like, not love Logan, but like I am a supporter until I die of Logan. But I can admit that he does not have the best track record. So for Charles to get beaten out by Logan Sargent in a Williams, we've moved past disappointment at this part. I'm going to turn in my membership to the Charles Leclerc support. Just turn it in. Take it back. Shred it. And then I have a second person, Daniel, mostly because I forgot that he was even racing this race until after the fact. So he just no longer exists in my mind at this point. Thanks for everyone tuning in and listening to us again. Big shout out to all of our race winners, Lewis, Alex, Pato. Woo, we hope to see you there again soon and come back and listen to us again. Bye, guys.